The penthouse sat 47 stories above Manhattan, like a gleaming monument to a woman's refusal to be ordinary. Victoria Sinclair had designed every detail herself. The marble floors that echoed solitude, the cream-colored sofa that cost more than most people's annual salary, the floor-to-ceiling windows that showed the city but never let it in. Every piece was a statement, every corner was controlled. At 2:47 in the morning on a February Wednesday, Victoria pushed through the heavy glass doors of her home and felt the familiar exhale that came only here. The board meeting had run 4 hours past schedule. 4 hours of men in suits arguing about quarterly projections, about zoning regulations, about whether a company should expand into neighborhoods that couldn't afford them. 4 hours of her sitting at the head of a table reminding these men that she'd built Sinclair properties from nothing while they were still inheriting their mother's trust funds. The headache behind her temples was the kind that lived in the space between exhaustion and rage. She'd taken 2 ibuprofen in the car. She'd pressed her forehead against the cold window. She told herself that in 20 minutes she would hold her daughter. Luna would be 3 months old tomorrow. And Victoria had missed that morning's feeding because of a call with investors. She'd missed bedtime last night because of email. She'd missed the doctor's appointment yesterday because Patricia, her nanny, had assured her everything was fine. That babies were fine. That Victoria's daughter was fine without her. But Victoria needed to hold her anyway. That was the ritual now. Come home at impossible hours. Check on Luna before turning off any lights. Confirm that the tiny human she'd created was still breathing, still hers, still waiting to be claimed. Patricia should be in the nursery. Patricia was always in the nursery at night. That was what Victoria paid her for presents when Victoria couldn't manage it. Competence when Victoria's schedule made motherhood feel like a luxury instead of a requirement. Instead, there was silence. Then a voice. Male. Humming something off-key. From the living room. Victoria's hand went to her phone. Not consciously. Her body moved before her mind caught up. The way an animal responds to threat. To wrongness. To something in its space that didn't belong. She moved toward the living room without breath. Without sound. The way she'd learned to move through boardrooms when she didn't want anyone to notice her gathering information. A man sat on her cream sofa. His back was to her. The size of him registered first. Broad shoulders. The kind that filled space not through muscle, but through the way he occupied air without apologizing for it. One of his hands supported something small and precious against his chest. As he shifted slightly in the light from the window, Victoria saw the dark coils of hair. Her daughter, Luna. A stranger was holding her 3-month-old daughter. Victoria's finger hovered over the 9 on her phone. Her pulse hammered in her ears like something trying to escape. Every instinct screamed for her to move forward, to snatch her baby away, to call security, to destroy whoever dared walk into her space and hold what was hers. The man murmured something too soft to hear. His voice was deep, gentle in the way that felt performative. The way men perform gentleness when they wanted something. Then Luna made a sound Victoria hadn't heard in days. A coo, not a cry. A sound of contentment that landed like a punch to Victoria's sternum. There you go, sweetheart. His voice was barely above a whisper. Not so scary anymore, is it? Victoria's phone nearly slipped from her grip. She should move. Should speak. Should do something other than stand in the shadow of the doorway watching a complete stranger feed her infant daughter with a gentleness that felt stolen, borrowed, unearned. Who the hell are you? The words came out sharp as broken glass, sharper than she'd intended. The man jerked upright. The bottle nearly fell. He caught it with one hand while keeping Luna secure against his shoulder. A maneuver that required coordination, experience, the kind of muscle memory that came from doing this 1,000 times, not performing it, living it. He turned to face her. Victoria registered his appearance in fragments: early 30s, dark skin catching the light from the floor to ceiling windows. Dark curls cropped close and slightly flattened from a long day under a work cap. Work boots, a navy shirt that had seen better days, the collar unbuttoned because he'd grown warm holding her baby. His eyes were warm too, genuinely terrified. "Ms. Hart, I'm so sorry, I didn't hear you come in." He stood carefully cradling Luna like she was made of glass and starlight. Not like he wanted to impress Victoria, like he understood that this moment mattered, that his movements had weight, that stepping wrong would shatter something irreplaceable. That changed something in her. She hated that it did. "I'm Marcus Morrison from Riverside Plumbing and Heating." He said his name like an apology, like his very existence in her space was something that required forgiveness. Victoria took 3 steps forward, hand extended like she was in a boardroom instead of her own living room at nearly 3 in the morning. "Give me my daughter now." "Of course," he said immediately. "Yes." He moved toward her. But Luna chose that moment to whimper, her face scrunching up in preparation for a full-blown wail. Marcus stopped. Victoria stopped. They stood frozen, a bizarre tableau in the middle of a $1 million penthouse. The baby, who barely knew her own mother's voice, began to cry. "I can explain," Marcus said quickly, bouncing slightly on his heels, the way Victoria had seen in parenting videos, but never quite managed to execute. "Hannah got an emergency call. Her mother fell. She asked if I could watch Lily for a few minutes while she left. My daughter with a plumber." Victoria's voice could have cut steel. "And I told her I have a son." He continued, the words coming faster now. The desperation of a man trying to explain something that couldn't really be explained. "That I knew what I was doing. It was only supposed to be 10 minutes, but then Luna got upset and the bottle was right there and I just..." He trailed off, looking helpless, in a way Victoria recognized, in the way a mirror looks helpless when it shows you something you weren't ready to see. "I'm sorry. I should have called you." Victoria reached for Luna. She was supposed to take her daughter, hold her, reclaim what was hers. Instead, Luna's cries intensified the moment Victoria's hands came near, her little body going rigid with rejection. Marcus winced like the baby's screams were his own pain. "She's been like that for about 20 minutes, he said carefully, not moving closer, not pushing, not trying to convince, just stating facts. "Wouldn't settle until I tried the bottle. I think she might have been hungry." Of course she was hungry. Victoria had left explicit instructions about feeding times, written them down in the leather planner she carried everywhere. Communicated them 3 times to Patricia to make sure there was no confusion. No room for the kind of mistakes that mothers made when they weren't paying attention. But Hannah must have gotten the emergency call before the scheduled feeding, and now her baby was being comforted by a stranger, while her own mother stood there useless, unable to do the one job she'd promised herself she was good at. "How long have you been here?" Victoria asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "About 45 minutes total. The water heater issue took 20. Hannah left maybe 25 minutes ago." He shifted Luna higher on his shoulder, one dark brown hand supporting her head with practiced ease, the same soothing motion the lactation consultant had demonstrated in the hospital. The motion Victoria had watched, had tried, and failed to replicate. "Look, I know how this looks. I know you don't know me from Adam, but I promise you I was just trying to help." Luna's cries had softened to hiccuping whimpers. Victoria watched the way Marcus's thumb traced small circles on her daughter's back, gentle, rhythmic, absolutely devastating in its competence. "You said you have a son. Jaylen, he's 5. The words hung in the air between them. Victoria heard what he didn't say, recognized the weight of single parenthood in the tired lines around his eyes. The kind of tired that came from doing it alone, from being the only parent standing between your child and the world. From learning to be enough when enough was sometimes all you could be. Still, he was a stranger in her home holding her child. "I need you to leave," she said quietly. Marcus nodded immediately. "Of course." He moved toward her. But the moment he tried to transfer Luna into Victoria's arms, the baby's cries escalated instantly, her face turning an alarming shade of red. Victoria took her anyway, rocking and shushing the way the book said to do. Luna wailed louder. Marcus stood there, hands hovering awkwardly, clearly torn between leaving and staying, between respecting her authority and acknowledging what they both knew to be true. He could comfort this baby better than her own mother could. "Maybe try the bottle," he offered quietly. She only had about an ounce. Victoria tried. Luna turned her head away, body arching backward like she was trying to escape her own mother's touch. "Here." Marcus reached out, then caught himself. "Sorry, may I?" Against every instinct, every rule she'd set for herself about strangers and safety and maintaining control. Victoria handed her daughter back. Luna quieted within seconds, not gradually, within heartbeats. Her cries stopped. Her body relaxed. Her tiny hand reached up and grabbed Marcus's shirt like he was an anchor in a storm. Victoria stood in her own living room, watching a man she'd never met do something she'd been failing at for 3 months. Make her daughter happy. The thought landed like a punch to the sternum, hard enough that she had to look away. Marcus had settled back onto the sofa. Her expensive cream-colored never-sit-on sofa, and Luna was cradled in the crook of his arm. Bottle angled just right. He wasn't looking at Victoria anymore. His entire focus was on the baby, murmuring nonsense words between her pulls on the bottle. "There you go, sweetheart. Not so scary anymore, right? Right?" Victoria's phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Mrs. Hart. I'm so sorry. Mom broke her hip. At hospital now. Called agency for replacement tonight. Marcus said he'd stay until you got home. I'm so sorry." So he'd volunteered, hadn't been coerced or manipulated, had simply chosen to stay, to help, to be present with a baby who wasn't his, in a situation that wasn't his responsibility, for a woman who was currently looking at him like he'd committed some kind of crime. Victoria looked at him again, really looked this time, saw the careful way he supported Luna's head, the patience in his posture, the small smile when the baby's eyes started to droop. She saw a man who understood something about love that she'd been trying to buy her way through for 3 months. "You've done this before," she said. It wasn't a question. "Every day for 5 years. Marcus glanced up briefly. Jaylen was colicky. Didn't sleep through the night until he was almost 2. I got pretty good at the midnight bottle shuffle. Where's his mother? The question was too personal, too intrusive. But Victoria needed to know who this man was before she could decide what to do with the information that he'd made her feel like a failure in her own home. Marcus's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. Car accident. 3 years ago. She was on her way home from picking up dinner. I'm sorry. Me too. He looked down at Luna, who was nearly asleep now, the bottle forgotten against her lips. Jaylen asks about her sometimes. I show him pictures, tell him stories, try to make sure he knows she loved him. Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. She recognized that tone, the determination mixed with grief, the weight of being the only parent standing between your child and the world. She recognized it because she lived it. Lily's father isn't in the picture, she heard herself say. The words felt dangerous coming out, like she was confessing something she'd built her entire professional life around hiding. He signed away his rights before she was born, didn't want complications for his political career. Marcus's expression darkened. I'm sorry, that's his loss, I tell myself that. Victoria moved closer, sitting on the chair across from the sofa. Luna had fallen completely asleep, her tiny mouth slack, one hand fisted in Marcus's shirt like she was holding him in place. He made no move to shift her, to remind Victoria that the baby was hers, that she should take her. "You should probably take her," he said softly. "I know you don't know me. I know this whole situation is bizarre, but she's sleeping now. Might make the transfer easier." Victoria reached out, and this time Luna stayed peaceful, as Marcus carefully laid her in her mother's arms. The baby's weight settled against Victoria's chest, warm and perfect, completely entirely hers for the first time all day. "Thank you," Victoria whispered. "No problem." Marcus Morrison didn't look like he belonged in a penthouse. That was the first thought Victoria had as she watched him stand to leave, buttoning his shirt with the deliberate movements of someone acutely aware that he'd overstayed his welcome. His work boots had left no marks on her marble floors, but Victoria could imagine them there anyway. Evidence of someone real, someone from somewhere else, someone who'd brought the world into her carefully curated isolation. "I really should get going, man," he said, and it wasn't a question. It was a man understanding his place in the hierarchy of her space. Victoria should have said yes, should have opened the door and let him disappear back into the city where he belonged, should have gone through the rest of her life, never knowing that her daughter had been happier with him than with her. But Luna was sleeping, and Victoria hadn't heard that kind of peaceful breathing in weeks. "Patricia will need someone to train her replacement," Victoria said. It wasn't a request. It was the CEO making a business decision. And business decisions were the only decisions Victoria felt confident making anymore. "Can you come back tomorrow afternoon shift, say 2 p.m. Oh, Marcus looked surprised, not suspicious, just surprised, like he hadn't expected her to want anything from him except his absence. "Yeah, of course, if you need me to." "I do." He left after that, writing down his number on a piece of Victoria's expensive stationery like it was a sacred text. She watched him go, listened to the elevator descend, then spent the next hour sitting in her living room with Luna sleeping against her chest, trying to understand what had just happened. At 1:52 p.m. the next day, her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "I'm downstairs. Is this still okay?" Victoria's heart did something complicated. She was supposed to be in a call with investors. She'd moved mountains to clear this afternoon. "Yes. Come up." He arrived in the same work clothes, but this time he'd bought coffee. Decent coffee from somewhere that wasn't the lobby cafe. The kind that suggested he'd thought about her comfort. Victoria noticed this, and hated that she noticed it. They sat in the living room, Patricia hovering nearby for 30 minutes, while Victoria's nanny asked him questions about Luna's schedule, her feeding preferences, the exact way she liked her bottle angled. Marcus answered everything with patience that seemed infinite, never condescending, never suggesting that Patricia was incompetent, just sharing information the way someone shares knowledge with a colleague. By the time Patricia excused herself to make lunch, Victoria realized she knew nothing about this man except that he was better at caring for her daughter than she was. "I should apologize," she said, the words coming out before she could filter them. "For last night, for accusing you, for—" "You don't need to apologize for protecting your daughter," Marcus said simply. "Any mother would have done the same thing." "Any mother would have been here," Victoria said. He didn't argue with that, didn't try to comfort her or minimize what she'd said, just sat with the truth of it. And somehow that made it easier to breathe. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. "Plumbing, I mean." "Since I was 18. My uncle started the company, brought me in to help. After Jaylen was born, I bought him out, been running it myself for 5 years now." "That's a long time to work with your hands." "Yeah, well, it's honest work. I'm good at it. People call me when their water heater breaks at midnight and I show up and I fix it and they stop worrying. There's something good about that being the person someone calls when things fall apart. Victoria thought about that. She was the person people called when things fell apart too, but she fixed them with money and strategy and the careful deployment of power. She'd never considered it the same thing. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Why did you stay last night? You didn't have to." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Hannah panicked. She had a call from the hospital saying her mother fell and she was scared, and she asked me if I could stay. And I said yes, because that's what you do when someone you know is scared. You stay. He paused, and Victoria saw something shift in his expression. Something like recognition. "You were scared too," he continued quietly. "Last night, when I turned around and you saw me holding Lily, you were terrified. And I recognized it because I see it every time Jaylen gets a new teacher or we go somewhere unfamiliar. It's the fear that you're not enough, that your kid will figure out everyone else is better." "I'm not scared of anything," Victoria said automatically. "You're terrified," Marcus said gently. "Your daughter stopped crying when I held her and you realized I could do something you couldn't. That's terrifying for someone who's built her whole life around being capable." He said it without judgment, just stated it like fact, the way he'd stated Luna's hunger the night before. Victoria felt something in her chest crack open, not break, crack, the kind of break that lets light in. "My therapist would like you," she said finally. Marcus laughed. "That good, huh? That accurate?" Patricia came back with lunch then, and the moment passed. But something had shifted. Victoria had handed this man access to her daughter and her space. And instead of using it to diminish her, he'd somehow used it to see her, actually see her. She was beginning to understand that seeing was different from being seen. She'd been powerful long enough to be invisible. They fell into a rhythm after that. Marcus came 3 times a week. Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Patricia trained with him, learned his systems, eventually trusted him to be alone with Luna while she handled other household tasks. Victoria told herself it was practical, professional, the kind of arrangement competent people made. The truth was more complicated. A week into the arrangement, Victoria came home early, not intentionally early. She'd cut a meeting short because she realized her hands were shaking. Her concentration fractured. Her calendar reminding her that Luna was 3 months and 4 days old, and Victoria had spent approximately 67 of those 94 days away from her. She found them in the living room. Marcus had brought toys, nothing expensive, simple blocks and a rattle. He was sitting on the floor with Luna between his legs, letting her grab at the objects while he narrated what she was doing. "You got that block, didn't you? That's right, you're so smart, look at you." Luna was drooling, making that contented sound that had become Victoria's favorite sound in the world. "Oh, hey," Marcus said, not jumping up, not making the moment awkward. "Didn't hear you come in." "Is this okay?" Victoria asked. "You bringing things for her?" "I have a ton at home. Jaylen outgrew them years ago, figured they might as well be useful." He paused. "Unless you'd rather I stick to what you have." "No, it's nice. She seems happy." "She is. She's a happy baby. You just need to..." He stopped himself, recalibrated. "What?" Victoria asked. "Nothing. It's not my place." "Tell me anyway." Marcus considered this. Luna grabbed at his hand, and he let her, watching her small fingers wrap around his thumb like she was holding him in place. "You're trying really hard," he said finally. "I can see that. You've got the schedule, the best nanny, the best food, everything. But sometimes babies just need presence. Someone there paying attention, not thinking about the next thing. Just being." Victoria wanted to argue, wanted to explain that she was doing the best she could, that her schedule wasn't optional, that being present wasn't the same as being good at something, but instead she sat down on the floor next to them. "Show me," she said. So Marcus showed her. How to hold the rattle so Luna could bat at it. How to read her cry. The hungry one versus the tired one versus the overstimulated one. How to just sit with her while she looked at the world, instead of trying to create experiences for her. 2 hours passed. Victoria's phone buzzed twice with messages she ignored. When Patricia came back, Victoria was the one on the floor, Luna sleeping against her shoulder, and Marcus was watching them both like he was witnessing something sacred. "I think I'm doing this wrong," Victoria said without preamble. "You're not," Marcus said. "You're learning. That's different." 3 weeks into their arrangement, Victoria asked Marcus to stay for coffee. Not to train Patricia, just to stay. They sat at her kitchen counter. And she told him about her mother. About the woman who'd left when Victoria was 7 years old. Who'd decided that motherhood wasn't compatible with the life she wanted. Who'd called once from California a year after leaving, and then never again. About the choice Victoria had made, never to be that woman, to be so powerful, so invulnerable, so in control that no one could ever leave her. "I built a company because I needed to build a wall," Victoria said, and the admission felt like bleeding out. "Brick by brick, deal by deal. If I was essential, if I was necessary, if I couldn't be replaced, then no one could abandon me." "But you were still alone," Marcus said quietly. "I was still alone." He told her about Jaylen, about how his wife Karen used to laugh about how Marcus knew exactly how Jaylen liked his milk heated, exactly which position made him stop crying, exactly what his cries meant, about how when the car hit them on I-95, Marcus was the one who lived, and he'd spent the next 3 years trying to be both parents. Because he was terrified that Jaylen would figure out that having one parent who knew everything wasn't enough. "I think I'm teaching him the wrong thing," Marcus said. "That I have to do it all, be it all, to be worthy of staying. But you know what he's starting to understand, that people have limits. That's okay. That love isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up." "I'm not good at showing up," Victoria said. "You showed up for your daughter when I was holding her," Marcus said. "You were terrified and you showed up anyway. That's what it means. They didn't kiss, didn't touch beyond the accidental brush of hands when they reached for their coffee cups simultaneously. But something shifted in the air between them, something that felt like recognition, like being seen by another person in the dark." Victoria drove to the office that night to finish her emails. But for the first time in her adult life, she didn't work past midnight. Victoria had never been good at asking for things. Power came from never needing anything, from being the person who provided rather than required. But 3 days after their conversation in her kitchen, she picked up her phone and asked anyway, "Are you free tomorrow? I'd like to get coffee." Not for Patricia, just coffee. The response came immediately, "Yes," where she chose a coffee shop in Tribeca, the kind of place where people worked on laptops, and mothers with strollers sat in corners, neutral territory, public, safe. Marcus was already there when she arrived, sitting at a small table with 2 cups. He'd gotten her coffee right, dark roast, no sugar, which meant he'd paid attention to how she took it, or he'd guessed and happened to be correct. Victoria didn't know which possibility unsettled her more. "Hi," he said, standing when she approached, not offering his hand, just standing, meeting her eyes, letting her see him seeing her. "Hi." They sat. "Thank you for asking me," Marcus said. "Most people don't. They're scared to need things." "I'm terrified," Victoria admitted. "I don't do casual, I don't do things that don't have a business purpose. I build my life around knowing exactly what the outcome will be." "And what's the outcome you're hoping for here?" Victoria wanted to give him a strategic answer, wanted to protect herself with language that was measured and professional. Instead, she said, "I want to know you, and I want to not be alone while I'm figuring out if that's a good idea." Marcus smiled. It was the kind of smile that changed his face. That made him look younger and older simultaneously. "That's honest." I'm terrified of honest. I know, he said. I can see it. They talked for 2 hours. Victoria asked him about Jaylen, and Marcus described his son with the kind of detail that only comes from really knowing someone. The way Jaylen insisted on wearing his dinosaur shirt every day. The way he asked questions about death because his mother had died. The way he'd started wanting to know if Victoria was going to die too, now that she was in their lives. What did you tell him? Victoria asked. I told him that everyone dies eventually, but that doesn't mean he has to stop loving people. That's the whole point, actually. The fact that it ends is what makes it matter. Victoria thought about that. She'd spent her whole life trying to prevent endings, which meant she'd prevented beginnings too. Prevented the kind of connections that required the possibility of loss. She told him about her company, about the satisfaction of building something from nothing, but also about the exhaustion of always being the smartest person in the room, about the way power created distance, the way being necessary meant being alone. What would you do if you didn't have to do that? Marcus asked. If you didn't have to be invulnerable? I don't know, Victoria said. I've never tried. Maybe that's what we could do, Marcus said carefully. Try. They made an arrangement. Coffee every Friday. Just coffee. Just time. Just two people learning what it meant to be seen by someone else without trying to control the outcome. The following Friday, Victoria cancelled a conference call. The Friday after that, she left a board meeting early. By the third week, she'd started rearranging her calendar around their meetings. Her assistant didn't ask why. Her assistant had learned long ago that Victoria made her own rules. You're changing, Patricia said one afternoon, watching Victoria sit in the living room with Luna instead of working. In a good way. I'm changing because I'm terrified, Victoria said, not because I've become better. Sometimes those are the same thing, Patricia said. When Marcus accepted Victoria's invitation to dinner at the penthouse, he showed up in his only non-work shirt, buttoned down, blue, carefully pressed. It was the gesture that undid Victoria. The care he'd taken to show up as someone other than the plumber. As if her world was important enough to change for. She should have known then that he would become dangerous to her carefully constructed life. They ate dinner while Luna slept. Patricia had prepared everything. The food, the space, the excuse for them to be alone. Victoria told herself this was practical, not romantic. Told herself that wanting him nearby was about convenience, not about the way her hands trembled when he looked at her. After dinner, they moved to the living room. The cream sofa, the expensive one he'd been so nervous about sitting on. This is a beautiful place, Marcus said, looking around. Really beautiful, but it's empty. It's exactly how I designed it. That's what I mean, it's a museum. Everything's so perfect that there's no room for anything real. Victoria wanted to argue. Instead, she said, is that a criticism? No, Marcus said. It's an observation. You built all of this to feel safe, and it did until it didn't. Until safe started feeling like lonely. He stood up and moved to the windows. The city spread out below them. Millions of people in millions of homes, living lives that touched other lives. Victoria had spent years trying to touch as few lives as possible. What are you doing here? She asked. Not defensive, just asking. Marcus turned. I'm looking at the view from your isolation. And what do you see? I see a woman who built something incredible because she was trying to survive. And now that she's survived, she doesn't know who she is without the surviving. Victoria felt tears threatening and fought them back with the same force she'd used to fight her way to the top of her company. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Need someone, trust someone, let someone see me and not think I'm broken. Marcus came back to the sofa. Didn't touch her, just sat close enough that she could feel his presence, steady and real. You're not broken, he said. You're just defended, and there's a difference. How can you tell, Bo? Because broken people can't love like you love your daughter. Defended people protect things. You'd burn the world down to protect Luna. That's not broken, that's fierce. He told her about losing Karen, about the moment the police called, and his entire world became before and after, about how he almost drowned in his own grief, because he had to stay alive for Jaylen, had to be strong when his own knees wanted to collapse, about how the only thing that saved him was learning to let people help him. Was admitting that being a good father didn't mean being invulnerable. I had to break, Marcus said. I had to fall apart and get back up, and eventually I realized that falling apart wasn't failure. It was necessary. It was the only way I could learn that there were people who would catch me on the way down. Victoria looked at him, really looked at him, at the lines around his eyes that came from grief and survival and something like wisdom, at his hands, which were gentle but strong, which had held her daughter and her daughter's future in their calloused fingers. I think I need to fall apart, she whispered. Then fall, Marcus said, but not alone, I'll catch you. Week 5. Victoria realized she was thinking about her calendar around when she could see him. The arrangement was simple. Thursday afternoons, Marcus would pick up Jaylen from school, and she would meet them. They would be together. Not in her penthouse, not in his apartment, but in the real world. Public, visible. Victoria drove to the school in her Range Rover, the car that cost more than Marcus's annual income. She parked in the visitor spot and felt every eye in the lot notice her arrival. Not because she was beautiful or remarkable, but because she didn't belong here. This was a world of school teachers and working parents, and people who worried about mortgage payments and sitter costs. She saw Marcus first, standing by the fence, Jaylen's hand in his, both of them looking for her. Jaylen's face lit up when he saw her. That was the moment Victoria understood that she was in serious trouble. Evelyn's here, Jaylen shouted, pulling Marcus toward her. He was 6 probably, old enough to understand that adults were complicated, young enough to believe that Victoria's presence meant he was safe. Hi, buddy, Victoria said, letting him hug her. He smelled like lunch and playground, and the specific scent of childhood. Are you coming to dinner? Jaylen asked. Dad said maybe you would. Marcus gave her a look, the kind of look that said no pressure, this is your choice. And that was the problem. It wasn't just about her anymore, it was about Jaylen believing that Victoria would stay. It was about building expectations in a child whose mother had already left. I have a board meeting at 7, Victoria heard herself say. But maybe next week. She felt Marcus's disappointment like a physical thing. But he didn't push, didn't make her feel guilty, just nodded and took Jaylen's hand again. Next week for sure, he said. Victoria drove to her board meeting and sat through hours of discussion about quarterly projections and investor returns and the careful deployment of her company's power. She listened to Clayton Rothschild, her board chair, talk about expansion opportunities in neighborhoods she'd never visited, about profit margins that would displace families without leaving a mark on her conscience, and she realized she was in a boardroom making decisions about people's lives, while a 6-year-old was waiting for her to show up at dinner. The injustice of it hit her suddenly, not the injustice of others, but the injustice she was doing to herself. She'd spent her whole life proving she could have a company. What she hadn't proven was that she could have a life. She left the meeting at 7:45, left without permission, without announcement, just stood up and walked out while Clayton was mid-sentence. Her car brought her to Marcus's apartment in Brooklyn. It was small. A 1-bedroom that he'd somehow made into a home, with 2 kids' worth of toys and drawings, and the evidence of a life actually lived. Jaylen was already in bed, Luna was sleeping in a portable crib in the corner, Marcus was cleaning up dinner. I'm sorry, Victoria said, I should have been here. Yeah, Marcus said, you should have been. He wasn't being cruel, just honest. And Victoria realized that the people who loved you were the only ones who could tell you the truth. Can I try again? She asked. Can we have dinner next week and I promise I'll be here? Marcus looked at her. You have to mean it, Victoria. Jaylen's already lost one mother. He doesn't need to lose another one because you got scared and went back to your safe life. I'm not going back, Victoria said. I'm too far gone already. It wasn't the most romantic thing she could have said, but it was true. Somewhere between the night he'd held her daughter and right now in this small apartment that smelled like real life, Victoria had stopped being able to imagine returning to the woman she'd been. 2 weeks later, Victoria showed up on a Saturday afternoon without calling first. She had a key now. Marcus had given it to her. Casual as anything, like she was already part of his life. She let herself in and found him in the kitchen. Flour covered the counter. Both of them, Marcus and Jaylen, were covered in flour, laughing about something. Marcus's hands guiding Jaylen's smaller ones in the process of making cookies. They were messy, gloriously, completely messily happy. "Evelyn!" Jaylen shouted, distracted, his attention still half on the cookies. "We're making cookies and Dad says we can make them however we want. No rules." "No rules," Marcus confirmed, "except they have to be mostly edible." "That's a rule," Jaylen pointed out. "A very loose rule," Marcus amended. Victoria sat on the small couch and watched. She watched Jaylen explain his cookie philosophy. They should have more frosting than cookie, more chocolate than anything else. And if they fell apart, that was fine because they were still delicious. She watched Marcus listen like it was the most important thing anyone had ever said. She watched him let his son make choices that were objectively terrible from an efficiency standpoint, but emotionally perfect from the standpoint of a child being treated like his opinions mattered. She watched him enjoy not being in control. Something twisted in her chest, not jealousy of Marcus, but jealousy of Jaylen, of the birthright this child had been given. A parent who knew how to just be present with him, who could let him fail and still love him, who could say no rules and mean it. Victoria's parenting had been about control. Luna on a schedule. Luna with the nanny. Luna with everything structured so that there were no surprises, no chaos, no room for a mother to fail. When the cookies came out of the oven, they were burnt, lopsided, ridiculous. Jaylen bit into one and declared it the best cookie he'd ever eaten. "Even though it's burnt?" Victoria asked, watching him. Jaylen looked at her like she'd asked if the sky was up. "Because it's burnt. Dad did it with me." The realization hit her then, hard enough that she had to look away. She didn't love Luna the way Marcus loved Jaylen. She managed Luna. She optimized Luna's life. But managing wasn't the same as loving. Optimization wasn't presence. Later, after Jaylen went to bed, and Victoria put Luna in the portable crib, Luna who'd slept through the whole afternoon, Marcus found her on the couch staring at nothing. "You okay?" he asked. "I think I'm doing this wrong," she said. "With Luna, with all of it." He sat next to her. "You're not doing it wrong. You're just doing it differently. I have a nanny. She does bedtime. I work. That's the arrangement, and I thought that was fine because at least Luna had consistent care, reliable care, safe care. But she's happier with you and you're not even trying." "You're trying," Marcus said gently. "You're just trying in a different way. You're trying to provide security, stability, everything you didn't have. That's not wrong. That's love. It's not the kind of love Jaylen gets." "No," Marcus agreed. "But Jaylen's growing up knowing that his dad has limits, that his dad is human. That's important too. Luna will grow up knowing that her mother built her an empire. That's valuable. You're just learning to add presence to it. You're learning that you don't have to choose." "But I keep choosing work." "I know," Marcus said, "but you're choosing differently. You cancelled a call last week to be here. You rearranged your schedule. Those are big choices for someone like you." Someone like me. Someone who's built her whole life around proving she can do it alone. Victoria wanted to argue. Instead, she said, "I burned cookies with Luna once. I set them on fire. I didn't even realize it until smoke came pouring out of the oven." Marcus laughed. "Then that's your starting point. You're not the kind of mother who makes burnt cookies. But you could be, if you wanted. What if I'm not good at it? Then Jaylen will still eat them and tell you they're the best cookies ever, and Luna will grow up believing that her mother tried. That's all you can really do." Victoria thought about the penthouse, about the cream sofa and the perfect schedule and the careful distance she'd maintained from actual human connection, about how all of that had still been lonely. "I want to be that kind of mother," she whispered. "The kind who burns cookies and laughs about it." "Then you will be," Marcus said. "You just have to stop being afraid of failing." "I don't know how to do that." "I know," Marcus said, "but I do, and I'll teach you." The fight came on a Wednesday, which was supposed to be routine. Victoria had scheduled an early release from work, had blocked her calendar, had made a promise to herself that she would be at Marcus's apartment by 5 p.m. to help with dinner, to be present for Jaylen's bedtime, to be the kind of woman who showed up. Then Clayton Rothschild called. A client was pulling out of a major development deal. $200 million walking because of a zoning issue. Victoria could solve if she moved fast enough. She was on the phone with lawyers when she realized it was 7:47 p.m. By the time she got to Marcus's apartment, Jaylen was already asleep. Luna, who'd been with Marcus all day, was bathed and in pajamas, and being held by a man who knew exactly how she liked to be held. Marcus didn't say anything when she came in, just handed her Luna and moved to the kitchen. "I'm sorry," Victoria said, following him. "The deal fell through and I had to—" "You didn't have to," Marcus said quietly. "You chose to." "Marcus." "That's the thing, Victoria. You keep framing this like you have no choice, like these things just happen to you. But you choose your company every time. You choose them over us. That's not fair. I have a company to run. I have people depending on me." "I know you do," he said. His voice was still quiet, which made it worse. Rage at least would have been honest. This quiet was something like disappointment. "And I'm not saying your company doesn't matter. But Jaylen asked me today if you were going to die like his mom did, and I didn't know what to tell him." Victoria felt the ground tilt under her feet. "He asked what? He asked if everyone leaves. And I didn't have an answer that wasn't a lie." "Marcus, I'm not leaving." "Aren't you?" he said. "Because from where I'm standing, you show up here with Luna, hand her to me like I'm the backup plan, and you leave emotional pieces of yourself scattered all over the place because you can't figure out how to do both." "I'm doing my best." "Are you?" His voice rose then, frustration finally breaking through the patience. "Or are you doing what you've always done, controlling everything so no one can leave you? Because here's the thing, me staying or going, that's not about your company or your schedule or how much money you have. It's about whether you're willing to be vulnerable. And you're not. You're too busy being invulnerable." It was a low blow. It was accurate, which made it lower. "I think you should go," Victoria said quietly. "I'm not going anywhere." "No, I'm leaving. I'm going home." She gathered Luna and her things and drove back to the penthouse in a state of numb shock. She'd survived so many things. Her mother's abandonment, the competitive climb to power, the constant pressure to be enough. But she couldn't survive someone knowing exactly what was wrong with her and choosing to stay anyway. 3 days passed. Marcus didn't call. Victoria didn't reach out. She told herself this was good. This was ending things before they got more complicated. This was protecting herself the way she'd always protected herself. On day 4, a text came through. "I'm sorry, I was frustrated and I said something true but not kind. You deserve kindness too." Victoria read it 17 times. She'd been waiting for him to push harder, to make demands, to prove that she was right all along, that people only stayed as long as you were useful. That love was conditional. that the only way to protect yourself was to never let anyone get close. But Marcus hadn't done that. He'd apologized for the tone. Not the truth. She texted back, "I was scared, you were right. I was choosing safe over present." His response came immediately. "Can we try again?" Victoria looked at her calendar. She had a conference call at 4 p.m. She had investor meetings and board preparation and a company that required her constant attention. She blocked all of it, moved everything to next week, and drove to Marcus's apartment at 4:15 with her hands shaking on the steering wheel. "Hi," she said when he opened the door. "Hi." She didn't explain or justify, didn't pull out her phone or talk about her schedule. She just said, "I want to learn how to do this. And I don't know how, but I'm willing to try." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Okay." What happened after that wasn't dramatic. She didn't quit her job or abandon her company. But she did leave a meeting early the following week. She did rearrange her priorities. She did start understanding that presence wasn't about quitting. It was about choosing, moment by moment, not to disappear. Jaylen stopped asking if she would die. Instead, he started asking when she'd be back. And that Victoria realized was the beginning of trust. The first hint came at a board meeting in week 12. Clayton Rothschild had always been Victoria's closest advisor. A man of 70, old money, old power, old assumptions about how the world should work. He'd opposed her appointment as CEO. She proved him wrong. For the past 8 years, they'd existed in a careful balance. He'd support her decisions and she'd listen to his counsel, even when she didn't take it, but something was shifting. "We've been getting some interesting press," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Regarding your personal life." Victoria opened it. Gossip blog screenshots, headlines. Billionaire CEO dating working class contractor. What's she thinking? Another romance or rebrand CEO's new image. Another Sinclair sympathy play. The articles were benign on the surface, but the implication was clear. Victoria had suddenly decided to date beneath her station. Suddenly decided to be relatable. Suddenly decided to be human. "It's not an issue," Clayton continued, "unless you're using your company's resources to manage optics, which from what I'm hearing you might be." "I'm not using company resources for my personal life," Victoria said carefully, "but you are less available. Board meetings are frequently rescheduled. Conference calls are moved for personal reasons. Your focus is clearly divided." "My focus is fine. I'm not questioning your competence," Clayton said. He was always so careful with his phrasing. Never a direct attack. Always a suggestion of concern. "I'm questioning your priorities and wondering if the board should be concerned about your judgment." The meeting continued. Other board members chimed in with their own concerns, framed as care, delivered as criticism. The consensus was gentle but clear. Step back from public-facing duties until the situation stabilized. "Stop dating the plumber. Remember where you came from." Victoria didn't argue. She waited until the meeting ended, then called her lawyer. Marcus saw the headlines that night. He was at her penthouse helping put Luna to bed when his phone buzzed with a notification. He read it in silence, his jaw tightening. "We should probably talk about this," Victoria said. "Yeah, we should." He didn't sit down, just stood there holding the phone, looking like a man watching something he'd always expected finally happen. "This is what I was afraid of," he said quietly, "that I'd become a liability for you." "You're not a liability." "Aren't I?" "You're getting pressure from your board. Your reputation is being questioned, and it's because you're dating a plumber instead of some hedge fund manager with a Harvard degree." "Marcus." "I've been thinking about stepping back," he said, "about making this easier for you." Victoria felt something ice over inside her. "What do you mean stepping back?" "I mean your company is important. Sinclair Properties has thousands of people who depend on you. I'm not going to be the reason that suffers." You're not the reason. Am I not? He turned to face her. Because from where I'm standing, I'm the complication. I'm the choice you have to defend, and I think maybe I should make the choice for you. He wrote the letter that night. She found it on his kitchen counter 3 days later when she let herself in with her key. Dear Ms. Hart, I've decided to step back from my involvement in your family's life. It's become clear that my presence is creating complications for your professional responsibilities, and that's not fair to you or to your company. I won't be the reason your board loses confidence in you, but I also care about you too much to stay and watch you choose between me and the empire you built. You're an incredible woman, and you deserve someone who doesn't come with class complications, someone who makes your life easier, not harder. I'm not that person. I hope you can find peace with that. I'll always be grateful for the time we had. Marcus Victoria sat on the kitchen floor and felt her entire world rearrange itself around the letter. All of this had been predicated on the assumption that he would stay. That once she'd let him in, once she'd begun learning to be vulnerable, he would remain constant. She should have known better. Everyone left eventually. But then she remembered something Patricia had said. You're changing. In a good way. And she realized that Marcus had done something her mother never did. He thought about her first. He thought about her company, her future, the empire she'd built. He'd chosen to leave to protect her, not to abandon her, which meant she didn't have to let him. The emergency board meeting was called for the following morning. Victoria arrived with her lawyer in a single folder. The board members looked up, expecting her to announce her resignation from public-facing duties. Instead, she sat down and opened her folder. Gentlemen, she said, using that voice, the one that had earned her their respect in the first place. Let's talk about what you're actually concerned about. Clayton shifted in his seat. Victoria, we're just trying to protect the company. You're trying to protect the status quo, Victoria interrupted. And there's a difference. Let me show you something. She distributed papers. Stock performance for the past 6 weeks. It was up 3.2%. Positive press coverage. The highest it had been in a decade. Investor interest. Up $47 million since the first gossip blog posted about her relationship. The optics you're concerned about have actually improved the company's valuation, Victoria said calmly. People like seeing a CEO who's human. They like seeing someone who values family over power. It makes us seem trustworthy, relatable. She leaned forward. You're not asking me to step back because of actual business concerns. You're asking me to step back because I'm not controllable anymore. Because I'm choosing something other than the one thing you've always been certain would motivate me, power. Clayton's face reddened. That's not fair. It's completely fair, Victoria said. I've given you a profitable quarter. I've delivered growth. I've positioned this company for the future. And you're threatened because I'm doing it while loving someone. That says more about you than it says about me. She stood. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to think about whether you want to continue working for a company where the CEO makes her own choices about her personal life. And tomorrow morning, you're going to send me an email, either support or resignation. Your choice. You can't speak to us this way, someone started. Actually, I can, Victoria said. You know why? Because I own 51% of this company. I built it when everyone said a woman couldn't, and I'm not about to let you tear it down because I'm choosing happiness. She headed toward the door. We're done here. No one called her back. She drove to Marcus's apartment with the letter in her purse and rage in her heart. He answered the door looking exhausted. Jaylen visible behind them watching cartoons. I got your letter, Victoria said without preamble. Marcus winced. Evelyn, It's insulting, she said. Do you understand that you think I can't handle my own board, that I need you to sacrifice yourself to protect me? That's not what She stopped herself, composed her breathing. This was too important to let anger do the talking. I'm a billionaire, Marcus. I've been underestimated my entire life. I fought for every dollar, every contract, every ounce of respect in a world that was designed for men who look like Clayton Rothschild. Do you really think I'm going to let a bunch of men in suits dictate who I care about? I was trying to make it easier. I don't want easier, she said. I want you. The words hung in the air. She pushed forward before she lost her nerve. I went to my board this morning. I told them to choose support me or resign. And you know what? They're choosing resignation. Because you know what? The company actually performs better when I'm happy. We've gotten more investor interest, better press, higher valuation. All because people see a CEO who has a life outside of work. Marcus stared at her. You did what? I did it because you matter more than their approval. Because I'm done making my life smaller to keep them comfortable, and I'm not done. Because I'm also hiring you, Director of Sustainable Infrastructure Development. Real job, real salary, real future. And not because you're dating me. Because you're qualified and brilliant, and I want your vision for how we develop urban spaces with actual care for the communities involved. He still wasn't speaking. Victoria kept going. I spent 34 years building walls, being strong, being untouchable, and then you held my daughter for 5 minutes and everything I'd built crumbled. But you know what? The crumbling was necessary, because I was building on the wrong foundation. I was trying to create an empire that would prove no one could leave me. But what I actually needed was to learn that some people stay because they choose to not, because you've made yourself indispensable. She stepped closer. This isn't going to be easy. The scrutiny is just beginning. People are going to say terrible things about both of us. They're going to judge Jaylen, judge Luna, judge the fact that a billionaire CEO chose a plumbing contractor over a hedge fund manager. And it's going to hurt sometimes. Victoria! Let me finish. I know that Jaylen's already lost one mother. I'm not going to be another person who disappears on him. And Luna needs both of us to show up, not perfectly, not according to some schedule, but showing up. That's all love is really, showing up over and over, even when it would be easier to leave. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I was trying to protect you. I know, she said. But I don't need protection. I need partnership. I need someone who sees me at my worst and chooses to stay, who calls me out when I'm being controlled and helps me learn another way, who knows that the most important thing I'll ever build isn't a company, it's a family. He moved then, closing the distance between them. You're kind of terrifying when you're determined, he said. I'm a billionaire CEO, Victoria replied. Terrifying is my baseline. He kissed her then, and it felt like every promise she'd ever made herself. Reconstructed into something real. When they broke apart, Jaylen's voice came from inside the apartment. Dad, is Evelyn staying for dinner? Marcus looked at Victoria, eyebrows raised. A question, a choice, a possibility. I'd love to, she said. Marcus pulled her inside. The apartment was small and chaotic. Toys on the floor, dishes in the sink. Jaylen pausing his cartoon to jump on Victoria and ask her 17 questions about whether she was going to live there now, whether she thought dinosaurs would have been scared of Jaylen, whether she knew that his dad was teaching him to cook. Fair warning, Marcus said, moving to the kitchen. The apartment's a mess. Dinner's going to be takeout and Jaylen will probably try to convince you that bedtime is optional. Sounds perfect, Victoria said, and she meant it. Clayton Rothschild called the next morning and resigned, just like that. No explanation, just a quiet message that he'd decided to step down and wished Victoria well. 3 other board members followed within 24 hours. Victoria's lawyer called with even more interesting news. You should know, the lawyer said, that Clayton had been negotiating a merger with Stratton Development. Foreign ownership. The deal would have shifted your company's direction significantly, specifically toward expansion into low-income neighborhoods with the intent to rezone them for high-value commercial development, essentially displacing thousands of families. Victoria felt something shift. How many families? From what I can see, somewhere in the range of 200 across multiple neighborhoods. And I was supposed to approve this. Clayton was pushing for it. He'd structured it so that the financial benefit to you personally would have been substantial, but the community impact would have been significant. Victoria sat with that information for a long moment. All of those board members who'd pressured her to step back, to stop choosing Marcus, to remember where she came from, they'd been protecting their own interests, their own profits. The expansion that would have built their wealth on the backs of families who had nowhere else to go. Her choice to stand up for Marcus had actually protected her company from something she would have hated herself for doing. 3 months later, Sinclair Properties held an official press event announcing the creation of a new division, Sustainable Infrastructure Development. Marcus stood on a stage with Victoria, both of them introducing a vision that had been germinating since the day she'd watched him make burnt cookies with his son. A vision for building in a way that served communities, not extracted from them. A vision that used Sinclair Properties' resources and power not to displace but to uplift. This division, Victoria announced, will focus on sustainable community-centered urban development. We'll partner with local contractors, including small businesses like Riverside Plumbing and Heating, to create infrastructure that actually serves the people who live in these neighborhoods. We're talking water systems designed with longevity in mind, not just profit. Heating and cooling systems that are affordable and reliable. Development that strengthens communities instead of destroying them. The press response was enthusiastic. Investors saw profit potential, community saw hope, and Marcus, standing beside Victoria, looked like a man who'd finally found a platform for a vision he'd been carrying his whole life. When he spoke, he talked about his own neighborhood, about the way systems failed for working-class families because no one built them to last, about the difference between infrastructure that was designed for profit and infrastructure that was designed for people. I've fixed water heaters at 2 a.m. for people who couldn't afford to be without heat, Marcus said. I've watched families choose between hot water and hot meals. That doesn't have to be how it is. We can build better. We can do better. And Sinclair Properties is committing to proving that better is also profitable. They sold the penthouse 6 months later. Victoria had walked into that space on the night she found Marcus holding her daughter, and she'd called it home. But it had never been home. It had been a monument to isolation, a gleaming proof that she could survive alone. The brownstone in Brooklyn that they bought together was smaller, less impressive. It had a yard for Jaylen and a nursery overlooking a garden. It had worn wood floors and walls that had held other families' lives before it held theirs. Luna took her first steps there, with Marcus on one side and Victoria on the other. She fell and got back up, and neither of them ran to catch her because they were both learning that falling wasn't failure. It was how you learned to stand. Jaylen started first grade at Jefferson Elementary. On the first day Victoria showed up to help him get ready, she braided his hair, badly but enthusiastically, and made his lunch, sandwiches and fruit, because she'd learned from Marcus that perfect wasn't the point. She walked him to the bus stop and waved goodbye like it was the most important ritual in the world. One afternoon, Jaylen came home and announced that his teacher had asked what he wanted to be when he grew up. He'd said, "A plumber like my dad, but also a builder like Victoria, so I can make sure we build things the right way." That night, Victoria cried, not because it was sad, but because it was the moment she understood. Success wasn't what you built alone. Success was the impact you had on other people's children. Success was a 6-year-old boy learning to value both the trades and the power, to see them not as opposing but as complementary. 1 year after the night, Victoria found Marcus holding her daughter. She came home from work to find him in the kitchen. Luna was on his hip. He was stirring something that smelled like both delicious and potentially dangerous. And Marcus Jr. was doing homework at the counter, telling his dad about his day with the kind of detail that only comes from being heard. "You're home early," Marcus said, seeing her. "Conference ended early," Victoria said. It was the truth. She'd also negotiated to work from home 2 days a week. She'd also delegated more. She'd also learned that good leadership meant trusting people to do their jobs, not controlling every variable. Luna reached for her, making baby grabby hands. Victoria took her, breathing in the scent of her daughter, this human she'd created. "How was work?" Marcus asked. "Good. The Brooklyn project broke ground today. We're using all local contractors, all sustainable practices. It's going to be the blueprint for everything we do going forward." She said it with satisfaction. She'd learned to feel satisfied by things other than control, other than power. The satisfaction of building something that actually helped people, of using her resources for something that mattered beyond quarterly reports. Later, after Jaylen was in bed and Luna was sleeping, and the kitchen had been cleaned, mostly by the both of them together, they sat on the porch of their brownstone with wine and the city lights. "I was thinking about something," Marcus said. "What?" "About how my mom used to say that families are built on the foundation of showing up. That love isn't grand gestures, it's the daily choice to be there, to pay attention, to choose each other over and over." Victoria thought about the penthouse, about the cream sofa and the marble floors, and the way silence used to feel like peace, about the day she'd walked in and found this man holding her daughter, and everything she'd believed about safety and control had crumbled. "I was terrified," she said, "that first night, not of you, but of what you represented. The end of my story, the place where I had to admit I was lonely." And now Victoria said, "I think about that night and I realized that wasn't the end of my story, that was the beginning." She turned to him. "I spent 34 years building walls because I was trying to prevent abandonment. And I never realized that the walls were what caused the abandonment. They kept everyone at a distance. They made me untouchable and alone simultaneously." "And now you're not untouchable," Marcus said. "Now I'm not." Victoria agreed. "Now I'm just human. Just someone trying to be present with the people I love. Just someone learning that vulnerability isn't weakness." Marcus reached over and took her hand. "Success used to mean I had to have it all figured out," Victoria continued. "The company, the power, the control. But standing here with your hand in mine and Jaylen asleep in the house and Luna breathing in her crib, I finally understand what success actually means." "What?" Marcus asked. "It means you have someone to come home to," Victoria said. "It means you have a family that chooses you not because you made yourself indispensable, but because you've learned to let them in. It means that when everything falls apart, and it will fall apart, because that's what life does, you have someone who stays." She looked at him directly. "You stayed. Even when I was scared, even when I was broken, even when leaving would have been easier and kinder. You stayed, and because you stayed, I learned to stay too." Marcus pulled her close. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "I know that's probably terrifying for you, the idea that something could be permanent, that someone could choose to stay. But I'm here. I'm going to be here when you're tired, when you're brilliant, when you're scared, even when you're all three at the same time." Victoria rested her head on his shoulder and felt something settle inside her for the first time in her adult life. Not peace exactly, but presence, not safety, but acceptance, not control, but trust. "I love you," she said. "I know," Marcus said, "and I love you too." It wasn't the most romantic declaration, but it was true. It was real. It was the kind of love that survived reality, that didn't require grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was the kind of love that showed up on ordinary Tuesday nights in a small kitchen in Brooklyn. It was the kind of love worth every wall she'd had to break down to find it. Luna took her first meaningful steps, not wobbly and uncertain, but confident, toward both of them on a Tuesday evening 6 months later. Jaylen helped her practice, encouraging her with the same patience Marcus had once shown Victoria. "Come on, Lily, you can do it. Dad and Victoria are right there." That night, after the children slept, Victoria and Marcus stood on their porch, and she said something she'd been thinking about for weeks. "I want to marry you." Not a question, not a proposition, just a statement, a choice, a promise. Marcus looked at her. "Is that you telling me or asking me?" "Both," Victoria said. "I'm telling you who I am, a woman who's learned that success isn't an empire, it's a home. And I'm asking you, will you keep building this home with me?" "Yes," Marcus said immediately. "To all of it. Yes." 3 months later, they married quietly, just family at City Hall. Jaylen carrying Luna as the flower girl. Patricia and Marcus's sister witnessing. No board, no press coverage, though the tabloids found out anyway, and Victoria simply didn't care. Just a woman and a man who'd learned that the most powerful thing they could do was choose each other, publicly and permanently. Victoria still ran Sinclair Properties. She still worked long hours and made difficult decisions, but she did it differently now, as someone with something to go home to, as someone with a life outside of work, as someone who understood that the company was important but not everything. Marcus's sustainable infrastructure division became the fastest growing part of the company. Their partnership, professional and personal, proved that you could do good and do well simultaneously. That profit and ethics weren't opposed forces, that the best business decisions were the ones that served people first. Jaylen started asking about the wedding, about when they might have another baby, about whether they could paint his room dinosaur-themed. They did. Luna grew, and Victoria learned to be present in her growing. Not controlling it, not scheduling it, just witnessing it and being grateful. And one evening, a year to the day after they'd sold the penthouse, Victoria stood in the kitchen of their brownstone, flower on her hands, Luna on her hip, Marcus laughing at something Jaylen had said, and felt the truth of something Marcus had told her long ago. Success isn't what you build alone. Success is who you become when you learn to let people in. Success is the daily choice to show up for people who matter, even when it would be easier to disappear. Victoria had spent 34 years building an empire to prove she wouldn't be abandoned. It took meeting a plumber in her living room to understand that she'd been building the wrong thing all along. The thing worth building was a life. The thing worth protecting was love. And the thing worth fighting for was the person who sees you at your worst and chooses to stay anyway. She'd finally found all of that, and she was never letting it go. How many of us build walls thinking they're protection, when really they're just fancy prisons? How many billionaires, how many powerful people, how many mothers sit alone in perfectly designed spaces and mistake silence for peace? If this story stayed with you, if you saw yourself in Victoria's fear or Marcus's patience, or that moment when everything changes because someone chooses love over control, then you know what it feels like to finally understand that success means nothing without someone to share it with. When the person you're supposed to be separate from turns out to be the person you can't live without. When the thing you built to survive becomes the thing you have to rebuild to actually live. When you finally realize that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the only way to become whole. Subscribe our channel for more stories like this. Stories about second chances and first loves. And people learning that the most powerful thing they can do is let someone in. Because that's what this is really. It's about letting someone in and the courage that takes.